joining us, and I hope, Governor Nome, that you didn't suffer too much anxiety taking that well too familiar commute back to Washington.
No, no, a little bit of PTSD, but not too bad.
Yeah. One of the things that I like to always paraphrase is Dwight Eisenhower when he says, and we've listened from the disinformation and lack of information from, unfortunately, my colleagues on the other side. Dwight Eisenhower said that farming looks very easy when you use a pencil for a plow and you live 1,000 miles away from a cornfield. Mm-hmm. And that is exactly the problem that we run into in this body on a daily basis. There are too many people that are making decisions about the land management in our part of the world that they are not familiar with at all. And unfortunately, we have some people making those decisions, such as a director of BLM who is a known collaborator with eco-terrorists, and a Secretary of Interior who won't provide documents about her daughter's lobbying efforts with the Department of Interior and BLM. That certainly doesn't help matters. Sadly, it's critically important for us to pass this bill and hold this hearing so that we, the people that are impacted the most by it, can actually get accurate information about the impact of the rule from the people that are going to be hit by it the most. Mm-hmm. As we've discussed several times already this morning, BLM is not going out and holding these hearings in the areas that are going to be hit. We have requested the state of Montana to have a hearing in this state when we have nearly 40% of our state that is federal public lands, and we can't even accomplish that. We watch the administration, this one, time and again, try to pass or get around laws, okay, to bypass or get around those laws by passing rules that completely contradict them, thereby eliminating congressional participation, congressional representation from the people that we represent as their extension, and public votes, quite frankly. And so they believe that they could do that. Unfortunately, we've seen time again the Supreme Court side with us and say, no, the agencies are going outside of their bounds. So that all being said, Governor Gordon, Governor Nome, did the BLM ever consult with you, your office, or the impacted agencies in your state before the promulgation of this rule?
Mr. Chairman, Congressman Rosendale, no. There was some indication that you could have an information-only kind of opportunity. We certainly, I think the hearing was held, not a hearing, it was an information-only sort of briefing that was held in Denver. You could only kind of view it, but you couldn't participate, you couldn't have a hearing, you could not talk about what the rule would mean. And the fact, and I think the good governor from South Dakota mentioned it, the fact that they're ignoring, normal NEPA process on something this devastating is just a complete abrogation of FLPMA.
Governor Nome, did the administration meet with you before they promulgated this rule?
No, there was no input or even consideration for our office, no notification or consultation.
Okay, so do either of you believe that, as I do, that this contradicts the Taylor Grazing Act, which is law, which prioritizes grazing, food production for our nation?
Yes,
correct.
Yes.
As a rancher yourself, how does this conservation and management currently factor in to your typical operation? So I know that in Montana, most of our public lands are checkerboarded, and everybody seems to be the same way. So how is this going to impact the typical operation, conservation and or management practices for a local rancher farmer in your state?
Well, for us in particular, ranchers look at every analysis of how they utilize land on how it maintains that land because they recognize it'll need to be utilized in the future. These 10-year leases for permits to access BLM land, they want to continue to get them. They're not interested in a short-term engagement and partnership with BLM. They want to be good stewards, so they're eligible for those leases in the future. Myself as a rancher, looked at my land and utilized rotational grazing to get the most out of that land and leave it in the best shape at all times. And to go forward with a proposed rule like this and say that what we're doing today isn't working and ignoring what's happening on the ground, I think is extremely arrogant, perhaps naive, especially in the fact that when you look at the rule and read it, in fact, the more times I read it, the more offended I was, because it lacks any scientific data or analysis, that what we're doing today is not providing conservation and efforts, and that it isn't being a good stewards of the land, but also it doesn't give you any basis for why they're proposing these changes, and that it will actually better our environment, that it'll leave us in better shape. So, this is, it's very clear what their agenda is when you don't use any kind of data to back up the need for changes, have no analysis for the economic impact it'll have. You ignore federal law, you overwhelm our state's authority and rights with it, with what you're proposing as well, and then take constitutional authority that should be only given to Congress. This rule has done all of those, and I want to remind all of you of your responsibility here at this committee. It is to protect the United States of America. And what they are undermining with just this simple rule in BLM undermines all of those precedents that we've followed that are built on constitutional law in this country. So this is quite literally, and I've seen this so much. I've been in a lot of different roles in my life now. I'm a wife and a mom and a grandma, but I'm also a business person, farmer, rancher. I've served in our legislature. I've been here in Congress and as governor. I've never in my life seen such a short period of time where they have completely destroyed the foundation of this country. And it's not just in the big things that you see and hear about on the TV news at night. It's in rules like this, where they're overstepping their authority through a powerful federal government and undermining us as states, us as governors, and the authority we have to fight for our people and their way of life. There will be business owners, small businesses in my state that will be bankrupt if this proposed rule goes into place. They will have no land for their cattle, nowhere to graze them. They will be out of business. Their cattle are their manufacturing plants, their future, and it will be gone. These timber industries, we have one of the last examples of one that's still functioning, but we lost a mill in the Black Hills, and it was because of the federal government. We've got 2 left. Each of us have, and that's all we've got anymore, and we're gonna fight tooth and nail to keep that too. This rule would destroy our timber industry as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your information and for your passion. Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Gentleman's time's expired. The chair now recognizes